In these stories, when you hear this cuckoo, turn the page. This story is called Sheila Shallot. Sheila Shallot had a vivid imagination. She was always telling stories, but nobody believed her. She really wanted to go to school like all her friends, but because she wasn't old enough, poor Sheila had to stay at home, and her mother was always too busy to play with her. Sometimes she would sit on a large stone at the bottom of the garden, watching the bees buzz merrily in and out of the flowers. But she couldn't play with the bees. She often listened to the sweet song of the birds in the apple trees, but she couldn't talk to them. So Sheila decided to talk to herself. Every day she would sit in her favorite corner of the garden, talking and talking. Her mother would look out of the window and sigh, she's talking to herself again. But at least it keeps her occupied. Sheila's chatter went on from dawn till dusk. But the next morning, to Sheila's amazement, she found a fairy sitting on her stone. "Hello," said the fairy. "Hello," said Sheila. "I didn't know there were real fairies." "Well, there are," said the fairy. "And I didn't realize there were real fruit and vegetable people." When Miss Delia Damson passed, she asked, "Who are you talking to, dear?" "A fairy," Sheila told her. Delia went away laughing. Poor Sheila. She couldn't understand why Miss Delia Damson had laughed at her. The same thing happened when several other people wondered why Sheila was merrily talking to nobody in particular. Their laughter made Sheila begin to wonder if her lovely little fairy was really there. She waved goodbye and went slowly up the garden path. "I'm sure she is," Sheila said to herself. "I don't care what people think. I know my fairy is there," muttered Sheila to herself as she trotted down the garden the following morning. She played happily in the sunshine with her little friend until lunchtime. Then she hurried home to wash her hands and make herself look tidy. "I had a lovely game of ball with my fairy today," said Sheila at the dinner table, "and we played hide and seek." Her mother just looked strangely at her and smiled. "Finish your lunch, or there will be no ice cream," she said. Her father said nothing. As soon as the meal was over, Sheila suddenly grabbed her father's hand and hurriedly led him down the garden. "I know he will believe me, even if the others don't," she thought. "Daddy, look through the bushes, and you will see my fairy," she said. "She's gone home for lunch," he said. Sheila was looking very cross as she went down to her stone the next day. "What's the matter?" said the familiar voice of her fairy. "Nobody believes in you except me," said Sheila. "Well," said the fairy, "tonight, after dark, they will see." "We'll never hear the last of it if we don't go," said Sheila's mother, as her daughter led them carefully down the garden path after dark. "Look through the bushes," said Sheila. They all peered through, and to their amazement saw not one, but about 30 fairies dancing. Good gracious, they all said, she really didn't make it up. When the music stops, turn the cassette over.
And this story is called Benny Broadbean. Benny Broadbean was a real boy bean. He loved the garden and took a great interest in everything that went on there. The birds, the insects, the worms and the grubs. He knew them all by name, and they all knew him. You can imagine his surprise then, when one morning early in spring, he came across some horrible-looking jelly in the small garden pond. It was a cluster of round jelly balls with black dots in the middle. Ugh, he thought. I wonder who put that there. I must keep an eye on it. And that is exactly what he did. Each morning, he would peep into the water and inspect the jelly. For several days, nothing happened. The jelly didn't move or make a noise. The goldfish didn't eat it, and the birds didn't eat it. This certainly is a mystery, thought Benny. Then one morning, as he looked at the jelly, he noticed that the black dots were no longer dots, but long, curved shapes. Now this is interesting, thought Benny, and made a note of it in his little diary. A few more days went by, and another surprise was in store for him. The jelly was empty. Where had all the black shapes gone? As he looked closely, he suddenly saw them clinging to the water weeds. They are alive, he thought in wonderment. Whatever can they be, thought Benny the next day, as he watched the little creatures begin to move around the pond, wriggling what looked suspiciously like tails. They fed, wriggled and sunned themselves, then sunned themselves, wriggled and fed all over again. How they grew! Their heads became bigger, their tails grew longer, and their eyes could be seen quite clearly. They are such happy little things, thought Benny as he looked at them lovingly. They will be good company for the water snails and the goldfish. Legs were the next surprise for Benny. There they were, sticking out from the back of each little creature. A pair of long, strong legs. How quickly they could move with the help of their new limbs. They busily darted to and fro in the clear water. Benny's diary was becoming very full because of all the changes in these strange creatures. Surely they won't change again, he thought. But they did. Next came arms, ending in beautiful hands, and certainly their tails were growing shorter. Benny hardly dared to leave the pond in case he missed anything. I don't believe it, said Benny out loud when he looked into the water one day. No tails! The creatures had certainly lost their tails and were scuttling along in the mud at the bottom of the pond. Whatever next, thought Benny. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. day, Benny came to the pond as usual. He gazed unhappily into the water, when he quickly realized that his precious creatures had gone. "Oh dear," he sighed. "Now I shall never know what they were." Wiping a tear from his eye, he turned away, and there on a stone beside him sat one of his creatures. Yes, that's right. A fat green frog.